you set this up personally, or is this a Lullabot thing?
This is my personal Zoom account,
Okay.
but then this is just put into YouTube. So there we go. It'll catch up here in just a second.
I didn't see any settings. Oh wait, enter full screen automatically when viewing screen shared by others.
All right, well, we're live. So let's go ahead and start the introduction, which is, hello, everybody. It's August 1st. This is the Design and Usability weekly meeting. We're trying out new tools today. We're using Zoom instead of Google Hangouts. So expect some slight discussion about tweaking and tools. What's that?
You need to post the YouTube link in the agenda.
Okay, I will.
If we're live.
Why don't you take it away, Jen?
Okay, let's see. This week, we haven't had any major updates to BackdropCMS.org, but we have 2 outstanding tickets that we could use help with. One of them is a design update for the try backdrop page. So the issue number is 555. There's a couple of recommendations in there for things that we could do to make the page look better. But if we had anyone with design skills who wanted to look at that page and make recommendations on how to do it, how to improve it, that would be great. So far ideas are things like get logos with transparent backgrounds, sort of no-brainer things. But it would be good to kind of solve the problem in a larger way with either like accordion, collapsey, openy things, or just some better way to showcase the different people that support Backdrop or the different tools you can use to run Backdrop. The next issue, number 442, is a long outstanding one where we want to improve the process for finding and selecting modules, themes, and layouts on BackdropCMS.org. We have some grand plans about linking up like the module search to also documentation on how to move from Drupal to Backdrop. So if you're looking for the Path Auto module, there's already a page in our site that tells you you don't need to install the Path Auto module. We're going to fill that out with some instructions on what you need to do if you're currently using the Path Auto module and you want to move to Backdrop. Like, just don't put the module in your Backdrop site and it will upgrade for you automatically. We know that. We need to write that down and communicate that to other people. So there's a node on our site that we want to show up in the search results so that when you're searching for Path Auto, you'll get all that information. That piece is not hooked up yet. So we have the nodes, but they're not showing up in the right places. There's been no progress on this issue since our last meeting, but if anybody wants to help work on it, it's number 442. I believe there's a branch on the BackdropCMS.org repo called modules or something like that, projects, that includes reworking the module themes and layout pages to load projects using a new view mode that sort of displays them identically to the way they are now. And that's sort of the first step, because then we can mix in other content types using that same view mode in the search results. Okay. The next section here is on Backdrop the product, and we have a couple of issues we've pulled out as design and usability focused. In the usability issues, we want to make some progress on adding promoted modules into the project installer. So that's installer module on Backdrop itself. We've got a couple of steps here. We need to figure out, technically, this is not necessarily a UX issue. It's a sort of a heavy dev issue. We have to figure out in project module the kinds of changes we have to make to the feed to get the data we need into the feed. But once it is there, then we have sort of a design and UX issue about, like, do we just put a different colored background on it, and what color is that background, and how do we indicate visually in the installer that that module is special? And then we have a great issue, number 3755, for creating configurable layout templates. This is something that's coming along really well. There is a sandbox if anybody wants to give it a try. I think at the very end, we're just going to need a little UX cleanup in terms of You know, just the dragging and dropping intuitive. But right now it's still sort of a work in progress. So I would encourage anyone who's curious about it to give it a try and see what you think. But I think it's coming along really well already. We also have an item, I think this was added during our last design meeting, because I don't have the issue number for it, but we're talking about setting up a consistent way to display both the human name for something and its machine name all throughout core. So we have a couple of examples of places where it's done differently. I think the place that we've decided we want to model after is the list on the content types page, where there's like a normal sized font name that's human readable, and then a smaller sized name in parentheses that's the machine name. It says machine name : and then the machine name in there. I think that's the standard we want to adopt all throughout core. And if we had a specific function we could use for that, then we could it would be really easy to standardize on it. We wouldn't have to think about it anytime we wrote it down. A lot of times what happens is we end up with those things in different columns, and we talked about how giving the machine name a column of its own sort of implies that this is developer software, because we're giving people stuff they need for code rather than end user software where we want to give them a machine name. So just trying to like decrease the importance of the machine names in the user interface, I think is good. And having this tool there for anyone who needs to include both of those things, it will help do that sort of naturally. I don't know if anyone was able to look up that issue number, but I'll try and add it into this agenda after we end today. All right, there's also a special tag for user experience issues on GitHub if you're looking for those kind of issues. In the issue queue, there's square brackets with UX in them. We'll find you all issues related to user experience. We're always very interested in moving those forward. So even if they're not called out in particular in any given meeting, that doesn't mean they're not important. And if we get a working pull request, we'll be able to merge it in whenever. All right, so next up, design issues. On the design front, the first thing we wanted to do was fix the header. At some point, a hover color was added onto the account links, and it makes it very confusing as to whether the main menu is the main menu or the account links are the main menu. And so I think the decision there was just to remove the background color and add an underline. There hasn't been any pushback on that, so I think we can go forward with that decision. But if anyone has better design instinct on how to handle those, we're open to that. I don't entirely know what this is. I think this is an issue to remove the next one is to remove the background color behind the page title. It's something that is very, like in the basis theme, it makes basis seem very much like basis and less flexible and generic. And I think a lot of times when people are, I don't know if anyone else's screen just went blank. Okay. I haven't quite figured out Zoom yet. But when people install Backdrop, we don't want it to feel like they're running a Backdrop site. We want it to feel like they're running their own site. And this is one design element in the basis theme that I think prevents that from happening. So having a setting in the themes that would allow people to turn off the background color would allow it to remain backwards compatible for all of the sites that are already using it, but it would give people in the future the ability to turn it off, or we could just turn it off by default and leave them the option to turn it on, which I think would be my preference. So I don't have the issue number for that one either.
I think it didn't get made yet. I'm supposed to make it.
Okay, we can add that when we have it. I think that's also a good plan. I'm not sure it's necessarily a design focused issue. I'm going to put it in usability instead because I don't think we need designers to input on that. I think we've got it solved. But if you're a designer and you think that's a bad idea, let us know. And then the next one, I think this is also maybe design related, but not design. We don't need design help. We wanted to try and figure out how to get our image module to support SVGs. And this is something that just makes our software feel a little dated, the fact that you can't upload an SVG file. And so trying to figure out how to allow image module to accept that extension without doing the same kind of transformations on an SVG that it does on all of the other images. And when you have an image style that just changes the size, it would just print the same thing with like different like width and height elements attributes on the tag rather than trying to create a copy of the image. So there's got to be a lot of kind of technical codey stuff to figure out how to like work around the way image module currently works. There's a couple of contrib modules for Drupal that handle SVG images. Some of them, one of them is like a completely custom field type, which I think we don't want. I think we're going to want to put SVG images into existing image fields. And then I think another one is sort of like a, I don't know, I forgot what it was, but I don't think it was exactly what we wanted. I don't think it integrated with image module the way we're looking for. So we might have to look at those for inspiration on how to solve this problem, but you can try and figure out how to integrate it in. I don't know what that issue number is either, but again, I don't think that's necessarily design related. Sort of a new feature request, I guess. But yeah, we just need to figure out how to do it to better support our software. I think we want to have modern software designers like to work with. We've got to give them the ability to use the tools they want. All right, that's all we have for Backdrop the product itself. We have a couple of items for print design that we would love to have. Pop-up banners for events and new stickers. Both of those would need some design direction. So someone would have to go into the issue and be like, in a pop-up banner, this is what we want it to contain. The logo, the following tagline or whatever. And once we have that information documented, we have a volunteer that's willing to do the art part of it. But I don't even have any guidance as to like what we want on the banner. And so they're having a hard time starting the project without any guidance. So if anyone has any instincts about the kinds of things we want to put on the banner, I think it would be good to brainstorm that and figure that out. So that is it for today's agenda. Is there anything else we should talk about that is design or user experience related?
Are you looking at me?
I am, but that's just because Zoom is putting your face in front of me, so.
I'm just joking because I always have a question, and true to nature, I have one today.
Okay.
It's very much design related. So I think the background color on the title came up is something that I mentioned as I'm sort of just playing with Backdrop and like what I can do with it sort of out of the box with Basic. And one of the things I noticed, and I'm just looking for feedback on like, so part of the Tatsu theme is I'm trying to fix some of these things for myself at least. And so some of it, I'm not sure if I should like flag for core, for basic or basis or not. And like one example, and I'm just like, is this worth making a ticket about? I was trying to do a video of field blocks, right? And so I did a layout where you've got a content type with a node, an image, and then a body paragraph on the right, or a body paragraph. And I use field blocks, and I drop the photo into the left column, and I drop the body into the right, and the body has a
label?
A margin on it, right? So it doesn't line up with the picture on the left, which feels like it should, right? If you drop a block of text on the right and a photo on the left, you'd sort of expect them to line up at the top, but it doesn't because of that. Is that like a bug? Should I create a ticket, or is that just a quirk that we just really?
Yeah, that feels like a bug. That just feels like it was designed with one layout in mind. And I think it actually even might have gone in before all our layouts went in. So that could be something we just never tested before to figure it out. And I bet that there's a better selector to put that margin on than the field itself, or a more specific one that would be like when that field is in this region in layout or something. But yeah, that would be something to take a look at. I definitely think as you're working through these things, it would be good to have one issue where you write all of them down. And then that way we could go through and be like, okay, this is a sub issue, and here's this, follow up, like a meta. And then like, oh, this one, maybe not, you can put that. And even if that's like an issue in your theme where it's like, this is the stuff that my theme, or even the README or something, this is the stuff that my theme is doing, just so we have a place that lists all the things where you're like, that maybe that should be fixed in core. That would be good.
I mean, can you fix something like that in Basis? Because technically other people might have already fixed it.
Yeah, it
And
would
if we
be-
tried to fix it, it could be a problem, right?
Well, it depends. We'll have to look at what the problem is and what the fix is, because the way CSS works is that if somebody else has already overridden it, their override will win. We just need to make sure that we're not going to be like adding padding to somewhere that they won't expect it to appear.
Right.
So it's hard to say without seeing it. My guess is something like that we probably could do, but it could be that we look at the code and we're like, oh, there isn't anything we do will do something crazy. But it will need to be, I would like to do it. We just have to figure out whether it's possible.
Okay, thanks.
Tim, there's an issue at 11:40. It has to do with fields being floated to the left or to the right. I think what you're describing might be different than that, but that just got fixed very recently. It'll be in the next minor or the next bug fix release.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's not the same, but it might be similar enough that I could at least look at it. Okay.
All right. Is there anything else design or usability related we should talk about?
Well, I'll just mention, a little bit at your encouragement, put a sprint for Sunday, coinciding with the Drupal Camp Colorado. Are you guys think you'll be at the contribution day sprinting?
Probably.
Probably. Okay.
We don't have, but like, we don't have tickets home yet. But I imagine
You don't know.
we'll probably be there at least through Monday. But we'll see.
Well, I mean, there's nothing to prevent us from going ahead whether or not you're there, but that was part of the motivation. But I'm starting to pull together a list. I'm going to hopefully do a couple of tweets. My expectations aren't huge, but maybe we get 2 or 3 people that show up. Maybe some of them aren't coders, and I'm sort of trying to pull together some issues, like some of these design issues on a spreadsheet or in a Google Doc that we sort of have ready to go, like we have often done in Drupal.
That'd be fantastic. Yeah.
So we'll see. So if you have ideas, especially sort of non-code ideas, you can let me know. I'll share a link to the spreadsheet or the Google Doc I've created.
Okay.
So the only other thing I noticed, Peter's on the call, and he had this question about the API site. And since he's here now and may not be for the next call, is that something we should talk about now? Or?
Sure. Yeah, that's design related. So the problem, and I'm going to summarize this, but let me know if you don't think I got it right, is on the API site, we have this fantastic page for our form API reference that is this crazy grid of all of the form elements and the properties that are available for each one. And though it is nice and easy from a user experience perspective to navigate and find what you want, it is a nightmare to update on the back end, because right now it is just a giant HTML table in the body field. And I think that that's the way it came in Drupal. I think it was like originally created in front page or something. It's just been maintained that way for a really long time. And when we were looking at how to do it for Backdrop, we're like, well, let's just do it the way, because that's what we were starting with, was the Drupal one, do it the same way. And even back then, I think Luke was working on it and he's like, isn't there a better way to do this? And we're like, maybe, but it's going to be hard. So Peter has volunteered to figure out what the better way might be and help us try and get this form into a state that we can more easily maintain it. I think a couple of ideas that were bounced around in the issue were creating a content type and trying to set up fields for it, and then trying to turn this into some massive view, which I think personally sounds like a lot of work, just in terms of the amount of data entry, but also in the amount of work we'd need to do to get the view to render the page the way it is now. I think that's might be a non-starter. We'd need to do a proof of concept first and make sure we can even do it. And then somebody else mentioned something which I thought seemed interesting, which would be to set up a config file that this page could read from and then translate into this crazy form thing, which I thought sounded interesting, although they did mention like, oh, now we're putting content into config, and maybe that's not something we should be doing, but it would make it much easier from a developer perspective, like when you had to update it, modifying the config file, if it was in JSON, would be something you could just add a new line to, and it would end up in the rendering in the table in the right place. And we would take the design and layout element separated from the data, which I think sounds good. But Nate, I think you did a bunch of work on this page, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on other ways we could make it easier to update.
Yeah, 8 pages ago. Yeah, I made it so the table was at a diagonal for the headers, which helped a lot, honestly. Made it so that you could actually kind of read that sea of checkboxes. I don't think we could need to throw out the content type issue or content type suggestion. It's just a lot of work. That's kind of all there's to it. I think it would be a good thing to do though, because then you could do stuff like you could search for like pound weight or something like that, you know, maybe even to the point that we could get it in the autocomplete so that you could look up form API properties like you do functions and methods, you know, that would be super cool.
So each one would have its own page, like for example, what did you mention? Pound weight. So if I click on pound weight in the left-hand column, there's a little section. Oh, it's the very bottom of the page. Okay, so like that little section would be its own node.
Yeah, that little section would be its own node. Although maybe what we would do is we wouldn't actually, maybe those individual pages would be accessible, but maybe also it just linked to the view and jumped down to the section of the page, you know, just like it does right now. So it would have its own page, but maybe that page would actually just redirect to the overall listing and put it in place. Although maybe not. I don't know. That form API page is really kind of overwhelming. Maybe it needs to be split up into multiple pages.
I really like it, but that's also because I know how to use it. Just a new person, they'd be like, ah.
Well, or we could do both. You know, we could have a standalone page, but then the form API reference would be a view.
Yeah.
It's just the big long listing, but there's also the other one.
All right.
I don't know. You're absolutely right. It's total pain to update, but we don't update it very frequently. So.
But I know it's out of date right now, and part of the reason it's out of date is because every time someone tries to update it, it breaks something.
Yeah.
So it would be good to eliminate that as one of our problems to keeping it up to date.
Yeah, I remember. I think when we first made this page, it was really funny. Like, in like Drupal 6 land or something like that, the suggestion was it was like never edit this page directly, like copy and paste it into Dreamweaver, and then
that's like, what it was, Dreamweaver.
Do it in Dreamweaver, because managing the table HTML was so impossible to do by hand that you kind of had to use a visual tool in order to edit it. Which, yeah, I still copy and paste it into a text editor whenever I'm working on it.
There's also the issue with separating the display and the content, because there's just like quite a few inconsistencies that I saw when I was trying to edit it earlier. Just little tags or other things just not consistent with everything else on the page. So separating out here's the content and then style it separately, and that'll just mean that when it gets updated, it's all more consistent and stuff too, I think.
Yep, it's hard. I think that's what you were getting at. That it'd be nice just to be able to make small edits, but it's hard because it's a big mess right now.
Yeah, I also do like the idea of separating the display from the data, which is right now it's all squished together, which makes it part of the problem. But, yeah.
So when we say this is a lot of work, we mean mostly just manual work. Just to change it, we just mean copying all of this data into new nodes if we did that.
Well, that, and then there's also going to be a lot of work to actually make it render the way we want it to, because there isn't already a views handle that's like, make this table that goes like this with, you know, this information in these places and cross-referenced in 2 different ways and what have you. So we just need to do some massaging, like take maybe 4 records and see if we can get the output the way we want. And if we can, and we're like, yes, we can do it, then it's just a lot of work of copy pasting information into nodes. And I think, like, you know, with an army, we could do that pretty quickly. the question is like, with one person, do you really want to spend like a month copying and pasting notes?
I don't think it'd take a month. It would take a couple of days of like.
Well, I mean,
really going after
constantly,
it.
but if you only had an hour a day, maybe it would be a month. I don't know.
Okay, but the point is that it would be probably best to first,
Test it
before we
first.
made the, right, before we made the content type and ported all the data, we'd want to prove the, like, you know, that we've got it rendering properly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then do it, yeah.
So would one option be for me just to set up my own sandbox site, set up some content types, and then play around with the rendering and stuff, and then
We could even get you a sanitized database of the API site if you wanted to start with that.
Okay.
But yeah, if you wanted to do, I mean, figuring out like the data structure of what the fields should be on the content type, that would be entirely up to you. So if you wanted to do that somewhere else, that would be fine. But I think it would be better to do it on a copy of the API site, because then if you got exactly what you wanted, we could just do a config sync and you'd get it all moved over.
Yep.
Okay.
That actually, I think I raised a question about backdrop.org or the forum site recently, which is related. Like, you know, on any of these sites, if I wanted to help with a technical issue, not just a content issue, I think the code's all available, right? And we have repos with the code for all of these sites. Is the config in those data in the repos?
Yeah, the config is in the repository. It should be committed both in the staging directory and in the live directory. And then there should be a dev directory that's empty, that's for your local site. And there's a README file in the config directory that explains like the way that we deploy config. So it should be pretty straightforward. There's just a couple of like, there's some sensitive data that's in the settings.php file, like the GitHub integration stuff and whatever that you're not going to get when you do a code pull, but you probably won't need that on your local site anyway. Right. So I think the biggest thing is getting you guys sanitized copies of the database. And I know we have sanitized.backdropcms.org, where there are sanitized copies of backdropcms.org, but I'm not sure that API site, the forum site, the localized site, I don't think any of those are in there, or I don't know if they are or not.
They're not. I just checked.
Okay. So we should maybe create a ticket for Justin to set those up the same way we have the main site set up, because there's no reason we couldn't put them all in that same location.
So do these get periodically, I mean, could you get a relatively up-to-date database of backdrop.org?
I think it's the sanitized site has an update every day.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's automated.
Wow, nice.
Yeah. So if we could do the same thing for all of the sites, I think that would make it easy for anyone to work on. Short term though, we could manually create a sanitized database for forum for you, Tim, and the API site for Peter, and put it in the sanitized location. And then at least you'd have one from August 1st. And then once we get the ticket resolved later, we could have it update with daily ones too.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say the next couple of weeks, it isn't going to help me. So no rush. I mean, for Peter, yes. For me. But I would like at some point to find the time to do that. So especially I think the forum site is the one that I'd really like to be able to do some stuff with.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, I sent a ping out to Justin to see if he'd be able to do that. He set up the sanitized scripts previously. I doubt it's even very complicated what he set up here. Especially if we could just make like multiple pages, like one for each site or something like that. Then we could just reuse the exact same thing that he's done, one for each site. Right now, all of the backdrop properties are all on one server, so it makes it really pretty trivial to replicate this sort of thing. All right. Is there anything else?
Not for me.
Okie dokie.
All right. Let's meet again in 20 minutes almost. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. And if anyone comes up with anything they think is design reusability related that they want us to talk about next week, let us know. We'll put it in the agenda. I'm excited about Zoom meeting. This totally worked.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to turn off. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.